It's interesting because you released your autobiography earlier this year, your first autobiography, and now Echo and the Bunnymen are bringing out these first 4 albums on vinyl again.
Yeah.
What do you feel like you've learned from all of this reflection?
Well, I've learned that, we did something that was really good, and it was great to be a part of it. And like doing the book was like going back in a time machine, because you sort of don't really think about stuff as deeply as you have to when you're trying to imagine a place that you're going to descriptively write about, if you know what I mean. So you've got to kind of like throw yourself back in there and remember what it looked like. And so I've learned to be able to time travel. It might be like the book side of it was definitely a reflection, but the Bunnymen playing the songs and all that, it's not really a reflective thing. It's just because it's part of my life. It's there all the time, like we go on tour and play these songs, so it's kind of never goes away. So I'm not really reflecting on the albums, and I might be like in my next volume of the book, because I'll be writing about recording them and what we were doing and going away and all that stuff. But the actual albums coming out, and they came out a couple of years ago. I'm like with like sort of special booklets and things, so they're always around, And I did them listening parties, with Tim Burgess.
Yeah, I remember seeing that last year.
Yeah, it was really good. I did the first 4 albums, so I had to play them, and it was the first time for donkey's years, like 20 or 30 years, something like that. So I'd actually played it from start to finish.
Wow.
It was surprisingly good, Like I wrote on my Twitter, which is I did like a poll thing, which was, to see which was the most popular of the 4 records, And I call them classics. Some geezer got me ump. Like, why are you calling them classics? It's like, well, they fucking are classics. And like, there was nothing else around at the time that was kind of like that, that had that sort of clarity to everything, and everything was swamped in like shitty 80s effects, weren't they? Like chorus echoes, chorus and phaser and all that. It was shite, and then audible big drum sounds, and we tried to avoid all that early on,
Well, it's interesting because before these 4 records with Echo and the Bunnymen, I know that you'd already done Weird as Fish. You kind of worked on that solo project, which was in a similar, not in a similar sound aesthetically, but it was also trying to do a similar thing where it was experimental and it wasn't going for what was the trend. How did the intentions of what you were doing musically with these first 4 Bunnymen albums compare to everything you'd done prior as a musician and Weird as Fish and everything in that camp?
Well, I think that in the Bunnymen, it's always like a sort of like a natural sound that we go for, in a way. Like there's effects and stuff, echoes and reverbs and stuff like that, but we try and keep it, we avoid synthesizers quite a lot. There has been a couple of little bits here and there, but not much. So we like to keep it sort of like what I'd say was like classic rock sound, but the songs are always a classic rock format or arrangement, Like I don't particularly, sit around learning how to play songs by, I don't know, Eric Clapton or something, because all that's kind of based on blues, and it's kind of, you end up falling into like these sort of blues cliche licks and stuff, which I don't particularly want to do, because the bands that I like don't really do that,
Yeah, they forged their own path.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's like, I don't really want to learn anybody else's stuff because I want to create it. I don't want to be a copier. I want to be a creator. I like things come in, you can't help it. I love the Velvet Underground and David Bowie and the Stooges and all the rest of them, like everybody else. And all that seeps into the way you play, whether you like it or not. You can't help it. But I don't go out of my way to kind of sound like that, if you know what I mean. Just sort of, things just happen. Generally the first thing that you come up with is the best as well. That's the weird thing. You sit down with a guitar and you just sort of start tinkering around. And I never go to it thinking, oh, I'll do something like this, or I've got this idea in my head. I'm not that good, to know how to do it. So I just sort of put the guitar on and off I go, and then I'll find my own little path through it all.
It reminds me of, I remember reading an interview with you a while back where you spoke about that you had this theory that the less you play, the more that you stumble upon.
Yeah, it's like, you're not, if you know all music theory and all that, and where the next note that is going to sound pleasing will be this one or whatever, you don't go down the back alleys where you find that might not sound as pleasing, but is more interesting. So that's the way I sort of look at it. So I hardly ever play my guitar. Only when I'm doing stuff, really. You know, I don't sit around playing it for fun. It's not for fun. It's for creating. Which is, you know, it's kind of fun, but, you know, I've got other things I need to do as well. So,
are you still doing your painting as well?
yeah, I do odd bits. I'm not as... I went a bit rabid with that. It was kind of a reaction, really, to... like, my wife was dying at the time, like, you know, so it was kind of a kind of way of escaping that, in a way, you know, it's like an escape. So and I really flung myself into it for a while. I've always done odd bits just for fun, you know, and just relax your mind or whatever. It was just something else to concentrate on, rather than what was going on. You know, it was grim.
Can that ever make it harder to go back to it as well, though, when it's tied to such an emotionally intense experience and such a painful experience?
Yeah, it has a bit. You know, it's kind of... I could do other things, you know. I started doing collage stuff, which I quite enjoyed. It's kind of weird. You can only concentrate. I like doing loads of different creative things, but I can only sort of concentrate on one thing at a time, almost, you know. It's kind of... So it's either music or painting or collage or like I started the writing now, you know, so it's knowing which one has to take the lead, you know.
When you were writing the book, what did that look like? Was that sitting down every day at a desk and devoting a few hours to it, or how did that kind of take shape for you?
Yeah, I treated it like a job, you know. Every day I'd go down and bash it out. I started it before the lockdown, you know, before any of this pandemic thing in 2019, you know, it was just like on the horizon, you know, there's some talk of some weird stuff going on. So I was already kind of well into it by then. And the lockdown on the rise, the lockdown on the, you know, all that stuff kind of helped me because I didn't have to go anywhere or do anything, you know. So I could concentrate on it. I did it, like, it took about 9 months.
Wow.
And it took, you know, it's been finished for a while, but then you've got to go through all the sort of editing process and kind of proofreading and finding permission for the photos and the cover design and all that. That took ages. All that stuff took almost longer than writing it, you know. So, like, I've learnt a lot, you know, and how it all works and everything. Seems to be a lot more honourable than the record business.
Yeah?
Yeah. You know, it's a lot more kind of... doesn't seem to be as cutthroat. Could
there be scope for the record business to change, do you think?
The record business is just a big con. Always has been. You know, ask George Michael if he was still around. You know.
Yeah.
He nailed it. You know what I mean? You spend a load of money, you borrow a load of money to make something, and then you've made it, and it still belongs to somebody else. It's like, what? You know, it's like that now. It's still the same. They're just a bank. Just like a bank with really bad interest rates.
When you came back to these records for the listening parties last year, what sort of memories did it bring back that you hadn't thought of in a while?
Just how good it was, you know, and how we had a laugh and everything, you know, and everyone was sort of in it together, you know. It was a lot of camaraderie and, you know, good times and adventures abroad and stuff like this. You know, I'd never been anywhere. So it was kind of opened my eyes. Basically, school taught me nothing. It was all going on tour with the Bunnymen that's taught me everything. I'd say that and having constantly Radio 4 on in the background when I was a kid. That's the only way that I learned anything, really. And watching BBC Two films, you know, in the 70s and the 60s.
I think in order to learn that, you kind of have to be willing and you really have to seek it out yourself. When you kind of sat down at a desk for 6 hours a day or whatever, it doesn't really work that way.
Well, if I was writing a novel or a story, that would maybe be a bit more difficult. But I'm writing my life story, so it's kind of, the story's there. All you got to do is remember the bits. And like, you always remember some bits. I remember that time when we did this, remember that time when we did that, you know. And it's kind of, you've just got to sort of put it in a line in the timeline kind of thing. Just link them bits up, it wasn't that difficult, to put it into. The hardest thing really was like making it sound kind of funny and kind of, not boring and not too po-faced and kind of like, oh, look at us, aren't we this and aren't we that, So I'm not really like that, I think I'm just the same as everybody else. It just so happens that, we were lucky and we got into this position where people dream about being in this position, being in a band and everything. I suppose it was a lot of groundwork done by being into music, from a young age and kind of following bands and stuff. But I never really sort of thought I'll be in a band and we'll go around the world and do all that. Never really struck me. It was just like, this is a cool thing to do, I like creating music. That was it. I think a lot of these bands, when they try too hard, it puts people off.
Yeah, because there's a certain falseness about it too. When you you can suffocate it if you want it to.
Yeah, creeping around people at record companies and all that. It's just horrible, all that side of it, We let them creep around us.
We've spoken that when you look back to these albums, you kind of realize the classics that they were. When you listen back to them, how did it impact your perception of the band's progression through each of these 4 records from album to album? Did it change that in any way?
Well, I think them 4 are, the sort of best example. Well, it was the 4 of us were in the band, so it's a different, sort of dynamic anyway, So I think they are the cream of the crop kind of thing. Like, we've done some good stuff since, but I think that them first 4 are hard to beat, really. And I sort of think now we could make the best record ever made, and nobody would notice or give a crap, because we've sort of had our time, you know what I mean? Like, you can't compare what we're doing now with what we were doing then. Like, there doesn't seem to be. Like, I think what we're sort of becoming is a classic band, like the way the Kinks or Love or something like that, which is all I ever really wanted to be, So we can't get them days back, can you? Pete's dead, Les is left, and it's difficult to get it back. But we can do like a good kind of, I don't know what the word is. It's not like a cover band, is it? It's like a representation of them. I play the same things and Mac does the same stuff, so it's a difficult one. It's either that or you just pack it all in and say forget it,
But then, if you did that, it probably wouldn't be, like you're saying, becoming the kind of iconic band that it is today in the same way that the Kinks are. You kind of have to keep going to solidify that.
Yeah, in a way, but I think we have solidified it now. I think we're getting there now. I think, the fact that, the other thing is, we never sold vast amounts of records. Like, people seem to think I think people got this perception we were bigger than what we were.
Same with a lot of bands, like the Smiths and the Velvet Underground and stuff.
Oh yeah, well yeah, similar. Like, what did they sell? 60,000 records or something up until 1980 odd or whatever, and then and they always say, don't they, everybody that bought one of the records started a band. Whether that's true or not is another story. I don't know. It's a complicated and weird world which I live in, and it's not always great.
What do you think has been the biggest challenge that you've overcome as a group in reaching where you are today?
Pete getting killed was pretty challenging, but we sort of already broke up with Mac at that point. So it was kind of like, depends which band you're thinking about. Desperately trying to think of a challenging thing, yeah. It's more a personality situation where personalities clash a lot. So it's being able to deal with that.
When would you say you feel most emotionally connected to your own music?
Probably when we're recording it, or creating it, writing it, type of thing. Yeah. Once you come up with something you think's really good, you feel, well, that's good, happy. And then recording it, and then once it's recorded, you've heard it about 5 million times, so you don't want to ever hear it again. That's why it was good, like doing them listening parties. I hadn't played them records for yonks, and then I'd forgotten about all the little niggles, of that drum sounds a bit weird, or that that guitar could have been a bit louder, or I don't like that. You know what I mean? You get like loads of little things like that in the studio because you're focusing in. You know, it's like a microscope situation. But then when you've got a big space between, you've forgotten about all them things that annoyed you. Because, you know, it's not important. And you listen to the whole thing as a full, as an album and as a song, as a complete entity. That's why, you know, I thought they were really good as complete entities and like interesting. Not like your average pop band, you know. There was like a lot of interesting stuff in there.